Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell on Wednesday, February 8th, 2023, with news and views from the Nefarium. I'm recording this early today because this has been one of those weeks where everything that I scheduled has gone wrong. And I had a bunch of things scheduled for interviews, particularly today, but the weather has made this next to impossible. I've been dealing with a dog that doesn't handle rainy weather terribly well. You can kind of hear her whining in the background. So what I've done is I've moved today's interview to tomorrow. So I'm recording tomorrow's news and views early today because I think I can get through 20 minutes. Not much longer than that with the dog whining and scratching and under my feet and so on and so forth. Anyway, I want to do the housekeeping, and then we have something kind of serious to talk about, a short article that I want to bring to everybody's attention. Don't forget the vid chat will be this Friday at 2:30 p.m. U.S. Central Time. Please get your comments and questions in by tomorrow evening, 10 o'clock U.S. Central Time. We've already had a couple of comments and questions show up. Get your comments and questions in tomorrow, and we'll try our vid chat once again. Now, this article is about a topic that I've talked about before. And it's about something that is going on, and it's very dark, and it's very bad. A few weeks ago, I did a blog about that case in Pakistan of a human organ harvesting ring that was shut down by Pakistani police. This one is right here in the USSA, and the headline of this article, and I'm going to read the whole article. It's a very short article, but I want you to listen particularly to the numbers involved and to the implications of those numbers. So the title of the article is Massive Human Trafficking Bust Sees 368 Arrested, 131 Rescued in California. So here's the article. 368 people have been arrested and 131 victims rescued in a large-scale human trafficking operation by a multi-agency task force in California. The Los Angeles Police Department Chief Michael Moore said, quote, "We know that the sex trade is a prolific one that exists throughout the state and throughout our nation. It's an ugly scar against this great country that exists too oftentimes in plain sight," unquote. Operation Reclaim and Rebuild occurred between January 22nd and January 28th in 9 counties, including Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino. Various state, federal, and law enforcement agencies teamed up for the effort, including the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Victims of human trafficking, including ages ranging from 13 to 52, including children. Investigators worked with victim advocacy groups to provide resources to help victims escape from this life-threatening environment. Investigators responded to advertisements offering sexual services and visited massage parlors suspected of being involved in sex trafficking. Among those arrested included pimps and panderers. The victims, most of whom were kidnapped, faced threat of death or coercion and are isolated from their former support to become dependent on the trafficker. Moore went on to note that in the, quote, old days, unquote, the victims of human traffickers were often regarded by law enforcement as criminals. However, the modern attitude has changed as the victims are now regarded as being exploited by criminals. The 7-day task force is only a part of the law enforcement agency's everyday effort to combat sex trafficking, authorities said. David Cox, COO of Zoe International, a non-profit that helps victims, said victims are brought in from other states or countries. Cox has said his organization has cared for 489 youth victims of sex trafficking this past year, as some as young as 11 years old. In our city, kids are being raped 20 to 30 times a day. Meanwhile, another California-based nonprofit combating human trafficking, Journey Out, cared for 256 adult victims last year. He said some victims of sex trafficking have been pistol whipped, jumped out of moving vehicles to escape, gone missing, or lost their lives. Traffickers are master predators. They're on the hunt for vulnerable kids and adults. Unquote. Now, obviously, when you're dealing with numbers this large, you're dealing with organization or several organizations, a lot of money, and a network. And what interests me here is the implication that this is something of international extent, because if you have international helping agencies, then you've got internationally extended networks. This is, to me, something that has never been adequately addressed in these stories, is how extensive are these networks and who ultimately and really is behind them. Now, I've gone on record many, many times with my conviction or my belief that much of this business about the war in the Ukraine is precisely about some of these networks. In other words, the Ukraine is being used as a transshipment point, not only in money laundering and weapons trade, but for all sorts of other trade, including human trafficking. This has always been one of my suspicions about what's going on here. But there's something else I suspect is going on, and I hesitate to mention it because it is so grisly, but every now and then you see these stories, and what I have to wonder is just how extensive the connections are between these types of rings and human organ harvesting that we saw with the Pakistani case, and for that matter, how many of these victims were slated for, and I hate to be so blunt about it, but how many of these victims were slated for use in occult rituals? In other words, are we dealing with a network where the human being, himself or herself, is so collateralized by wickedness that you literally place an order for an organ that you may need, or for a victim for a particular ritual that you want to perform, and so on and so forth? My friends, I think we are dealing with something like this. And given the numbers here involved in just this 1 week-long operation in California, take that and magnify that on an enormous international scale, and you have a lot of money, you have a huge network, and you have a lot of people that are being disappeared. And incidentally, I would add as a possibility that you're also placing orders for human laborers, for people that can go somewhere and build things completely secretly that you never hear from again. I'd not be a bit surprised, in other words, if at some point you don't have government organizations or operations involved in these activities, and that you have, by the same token, you have some corporate involvement. So in other words, I think you're dealing here, given the extensiveness of these networks and what they are really up to, I think you could be dealing with something very nefarious and very deep. Needless to say, we probably are not ever going to get more than 1 or 2 stories indicating the nature of some of these human trafficking networks, but I do suspect that eventually these things are going to start to come out. After all, if you go back and turn the clock back to the Franklin scandal, you had precisely that kind of network involved in human trafficking that had corporate connections and had government connections all the way to the top. And that was just one very, very narrow little example of a much wider problem. So it's reared its ugly head again. This is something to watch, and let's hope eventually that we can shut some of these networks down. Anyway, that's it for today's news and views. Don't forget, tomorrow I will not be doing a news and views. I'm doing it early today. On Friday, we have our vid chat. Please get your questions, comments in no later than 10 o'clock U.S. Central Time tomorrow evening, and then our vid chat will be on Friday. So I hope to see you all there. Bye-bye, God bless, and we'll see you on the flip side.